Hello, everybody. We are live, coming from a few different places, but we're excited to have two great guests on tonight. Co-hosting with me is Sarah Farris, and then I have Sophia Veiras. How badly did I butcher it? I tried to use the Spanish accent.
You did good. You did good.
All right, good. So, just a little bit about our guest today. We're going to be talking about burnout, which is such a prevalent topic and probably doesn't get talked about enough in coaching circles and in athlete situations. But Sophia graduated from Northeastern University in 2015 with her doctorate of physical therapy and a minor in psychology. She continued her formal education through Northeastern's College of Professional Studies, earning advanced credentials in orthopedic physical therapy. While in college, Sophia participated on the club wrestling and powerlifting teams, finishing her collegiate athletic career as a NCAA national champion wrestler, a three-time United States of America powerlifting All-American powerlifter, and an International Powerlifting Foundation collegiate world champion powerlifter as well. So outside of physical therapy and powerlifting, Sophia empowers others through progressive education, helping fitness and rehab professionals improve their management of their clients with pain or mobility limitations. But that's not all. She also is, through the company Barbell Rehab, she released an online course addressing the unique considerations of the female barbell athlete and serves as a course instructor for the Barbell Rehab Method certification. She lectures on related topics at USAPL seminars and camps, teaching these athletes how to improve their training and recovery while coaching them to a bigger bench press. Sophia, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I wear many hats, and I'm excited to share some of the knowledge I've gained along these experiences with you guys tonight to talk about anxiety in athletes and burnout.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we're really looking forward to it. It's a privilege to have you here today. Sarah Farris is part of the Anxiety in Athletes Task Force. You've seen her on a couple episodes before, but she's a licensed therapist in Chicago. She specializes in treating adults with anxiety, OCD, and related disorders. Before starting her own private practice, Sarah worked in psychiatric research and university counseling centers. She also spent several years in equestrian sports, and during college and graduate school, she worked part-time as a riding instructor and horse trainer. She has a special interest in addressing the unique needs of athletes and mental health treatment. And so we're really excited to have Sarah here as well. And she also trains really, really hard too. So that's a plus as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm excited for this topic today.
Yeah, me too. So I think burnout, obviously, I see it with athletes that I coach. I've had it myself as an athlete. I've had it myself as a coach, which I also don't think, I could definitely dive into as well. I think burnout is prevalent among coaches too, because we're in a profession that is all about serving others, and then we kind of forget to take care of ourselves as well. And we're not often reminded by our workplace to take care of ourselves. So I think there's two sides to burnout and two different, areas of burnout, coaches and athletes. And I think it also goes along in the workplace as well. And whether it's coaching athletes or, in a 9-to-5, I think there's burnout everywhere. But today we'll talk about athlete burnout and coaching burnout and how we can kind of, as coaches, see the signs with athletes and what we can do to prevent burnout as well. Sophia, I'd love to hear just kind of, get us started on your experience as an athlete with burnout and how you kind of manage that as an athlete, but then also as a coach as well.
Definitely. I guess it started with my participation in wrestling and just the sports I've chosen along the way, I think, are ones that beat you up. Wrestling, you have people physically beating you up, and you can only tolerate
literally
that.
about beating each other up.
Exactly. So you can only tolerate that for so long before you're like, how much is my heart really in it? And I think, maybe when you're dealing with things like the turmoil of teenage years, yes, you have that angst to fight with, but once you almost lose that angst, you kind of lose like that long-term drive in it. But to be good, you do need to stick it out the long term, and you have to get beat up a lot before you become the person beating up others. So if you want to be successful at that kind of sport, you have to be able to take a lot of punches for a long time before you're the one delivering those knockout punches, kind of thing.
For sure.
And then now I'm with so now I do powerlifting. So now I'm trying to literally lift the maximum amount of weight my body physically can. And realistically, that takes a long time to develop. It's not a sport where you peak young, even. Realistically, the strongest females in the world, you're looking at 40 years old, like late 30s, 40s, because it takes time under load, programming wise, to find yourself, to really push the max envelope. Like, you'll see success before then, but you want to be able to last the long haul. And so I think it's important to address things like burnout to really be able to last for those 10, 15, 20-year periods that some of these sports demand of you to really be the best, or whatever your desired level of performance is along the way.
For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously as a competitive weightlifter myself, different sport, but what my weightlifting coach, Sam Axton, he's a national level coach, and he says, like, it's the people that last in these sports are people that are in it for the long haul and are able to keep getting up after the failed attempts and keep pushing through. But how do you push through without also being kind to yourself and treating your body right and making sure you're taking care of yourself too? Because you're not going to be able to push through those times if you're burning out.
Definitely. I think now more than ever, the conversation's being had about finding balance in your training so that you can last the long haul. I would also say that we're pushing the limits of human performance more so than I've ever seen, where now, for example, the masters categories are something to aspire to. Maybe I won't be as competitive as I want to be in the opens, but hey, I could be a masters world champion if I just stick it out long enough. But you'll never get to Masters 1, Masters 2, or Masters 3 if you're not willing to like find a way to stay in things the long haul too.
Right. Yeah, totally. No, I know. I'm in a 89 kilogram weight class, and it's the most competitive class, and I'm like, man, I'm competing with the best of the best, but if I make it till I'm 35, man, I might have a shot.
Yeah, that's
and
exactly
I think
it.
that can be part of the tricky piece of it too when it comes to balance, because it can also feel like you're sort of in this peak range where it feels like time is of the essence, or it may be limited, and you're also trying to prevent injury. So balance can sometimes feel confusing as well, of just trying to kind of like play smart but also not overdo it too soon.
For sure.
Definitely.
For sure. I'll jump into our, some of our questions. And, as a clinician, Sarah, you can answer this pretty clearly as well. And I mean, obviously we have two clinicians here. So what is burnout from a mental aspect? And then maybe Sarah, you can answer that from a mental aspect. And then Sophia, you can kind of answer that from a physical aspect.
Sure. So burnout, technically, it's definitely a term we're hearing a lot more. It's being used a lot more frequently these days. It's right now not considered to be an actual medical condition. So that makes it a little bit harder to define or describe. But generally speaking, we hear, when we think about burnout, we hear, or we think that there's sort of an overexertion or chronic fatigue, low motivation, loss of interest, worry or self-doubt, self-criticism. Those are kind of some general aspects that can kind of come up when we hear people describe their experience of burnout. It makes it a little bit harder because, one person's experience of burnout may look a little bit different from someone else's. And that's really just because we don't have a very clear definition of it. And I know when we'll get to a couple of other questions a little bit later on, we can kind of just differentiate burnout versus something like an anxiety disorder, let's say, or depression, right? And how sometimes that can overlap. Sometimes there are some aspects of burnout, fatigue or perfectionism even, or excessive worry or self-criticism, self-doubt, that can be some signs that we see show up in burnout. it can also be some aspects of someone's experience with like an anxiety disorder or depression.
Right, for sure. Yeah, no, there are similarities between the two. I think from a physical side, I know for me, I think burnout feels like overtraining syndrome. And Sophia, I mean, I'm sure you can attest to that. I mean, when I wasn't getting programmed by the right coach, I was getting overtrained, and so I think that definitely overtraining syndrome. I think as a performance coach myself, I know what that feels like, so I could recognize it. But for some athletes, they can't recognize that. But I think burnout is definitely in sync with overtraining.
Definitely. I think the tricky part is not separating those two lenses, like the psychological components of it and the physical components of it, remembering that they're all just stressors and your body can't necessarily distinguish stress. And it could be good stress, right? It could be exciting stress. Maybe there's a friend's wedding you're traveling to, there's a ton of stuff, but maybe you slept a little bit less and training was impacted because of that. Or maybe, training isn't going as well because you're really stressed at your work and you're managing that stress all the time. But I like to think about it almost like drops in a bucket where, we have this bucket and we're just putting drops in, whether it's physical training stress, mental training stuff, maybe poor nutrition, sprinkle in a few nights of less sleep or things like that. Our animal gets sick. These are all just drops in the bucket. And maybe our bucket is big enough to handle it and then you're fine and, you're usually good. Or maybe the bucket starts to overflow and teeter over. And that's when we're kind of starting to experience. And I love how you use that word, Sarah, experience, because everyone experiences this a little bit differently. But it's almost that process of getting filled up to the brim and then just being like, all right, this is too much and I've had enough. And that's when you really get to that, sense of the reduced sense of accomplishment within your sport, or you start to resent it. You don't even like doing it. You don't want to go to practice. You're fighting it and you're just exhausted. You don't want to be involved. And that's what we're trying to prevent. We're just trying to get people more active and to stay in these sports for the long term. So how do we get ahead of these things?
For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think make a good point about not separating things. I think oftentimes we, especially with mental health and, the struggle we've faced in breaking stigma of mental health and athletics is because we separate them too often. And because we don't look at things with a holistic lens all the time. And so the more we can do that, I think the more we can prevent burnout and the more we can identify burnout. I think in your sports, specifically at wrestling and powerlifting, it's very prevalent. I think also there's a prevalence in younger youth athlete burnout too. One thing I see with athletes that I coach at the middle school, high school level, I've coached at the college level, I've coached pros, I've coached middle school, I've coached high school, but a lot of times these upper age middle schoolers are getting pushed to one sport so early and are getting pushed to play one sport year round and specialize so early that by the time they get to their sophomore year of high school, they're burnt out. I've met with countless pitchers in the game of baseball that started throwing 100 pitches, every week, and in sixth grade, and their dad thought they should be playing every week, 5 times a week, 6 times a week, and doing long toss 4 times a week, and then all of a sudden their UCL's blown out. Their sophomore year of high school, and there goes their baseball career. And that's because we're pushing, sport specialization so early, and then because of that, we're not getting different movement patterns from different sports and trying different things, and our body's only accustomed to one thing. So that's one part of burnout that I wanted to highlight because I see it so often with youth athletes and with athletes I coach at the training facility I'm at now, and it's super frustrating to try to convince a parent to let them play multiple sports when they think the only way that their kid's going to get a college scholarship is by playing one sport since sixth grade. So that's something that as a performance coach, I try to shut down immediately and try to encourage kids to try new things. But just like anything, it's all in moderation.
Definitely. I think that, I mean, like you said, early sports specialization, that's actually been shown to be the number one factor associated with decreased long-term athletic participation. So like if you burn these kids out young, they're not just going to hate, that sport. They're going to hate sports, period, because they associate it with this intensity that they have to have. And I think, multiple things lend to it. I think in some sports, it could totally be the parents. We've seen that, like, if you've ever seen the TV show Dance Moms, or they make light of it,
Yeah.
but the little league dad. These kids are in 3 leagues at the same time, and I've been there. I played in 2 to 3 different soccer leagues at the same time. I would have multiple
Right.
games a week, and just push myself to do it. But I was lucky where I had different seasons for things, and I think keeping those seasons, encouraging a diversity of sports, but keeping general skills around. Particularly, I've appreciated that with something like strength training. But even then, you go through phases, right? You're not necessarily hammering away at the same movement patterns all the time. You maybe diversify training a little. Like you said, weightlifting's fun. I do powerlifting. I do strongman. Even for myself, I keep it mixed up. But for kids too, just like a little soccer, a little wrestling, or whatever.
Right.
Keep it fresh, keep it fun. But I think in general, one of the key things to helping with burnout is keeping it fun. Like no matter what age you are, you have to remember why you love doing this, because that's what's going to keep you in it long term and being successful too.
Yeah, definitely. I think also the more they specialize early, the more they identify with the sport. And I work with a ton of athletes now after post college that I program for now, just on the side, because these athletes have been athletes for 20 years, and then after college they kind of don't know where to go. They don't have that identity, and that's something we talked about in another episode. Obviously, was the life skills program that University of Pittsburgh has, and we talked to Kristen Mackel about how they develop identity after sport, but the early specialization doesn't help with that either.
Definitely. And I think we may even transition with that throughout our lives. It's funny because now that I'm getting older as an athlete, I appreciate the sports that you can stay with long term. For example, lifting weights. Very independent.
Yep.
I can realistically do it on my own. I don't need people. If I do, I can coordinate a few people to make it happen. I used to play soccer. I'm probably not going to find 10 other girls that want to play with me and find another group of 11 girls that want to play against us, and we have no subs for this. So like I don't think that it's as realistic for me to keep that skill ingrained, but I can keep up with something like lifting or running or more of these independent sports. It's funny, I actually start like karate was one of my very, very first sports. And I think it's something I'll go back to maybe when I'm older. Like I'm 60, I'm chilling, retired, and I just want to do karate. I have been inspired by Cobra Kai a little bit, but would love to rediscover those roots one day if I like need to re-inspire my athleticness, or that identity, like you said, that athlete inside of me that just needs a sport to do or an activity to be a part of. Yeah.
And that's where burnout can definitely start to creep in and make things trickier, especially when an athlete has a strong sense of identity within their sport, or if they feel like their community or their closest group of peers are people they relate to within their sport, within that context. So encouraging life beyond one sport early on is really, really healthy, so that it doesn't if they either lose interest or something else starts to pique their interest, or they start to feel like they need a break or burnout is starting to creep in, that they feel like it doesn't have to be associated with a sense of self and self-worth and self-esteem. It can be more related to maybe things just aren't clicking for me in my sport right now, but that doesn't have to mean that there's something wrong with them. And I think that that's where it can really start to overlap a bit more into, the psychological side of it.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So that brings me to our, one of our questions that we were asking each other, what are the key signs? And we can kind of combine this with, what should coaches, staff, parents look for when looking for burnout, and what are those signs that we should be looking for, and for athletes that are experiencing the burnout?
Definitely. I would say like just disinterest, fatigue, with the strength sports especially, you start to see teeters off in strength. You see it like physically. You see maybe their trend line decreasing, they're not pushing their weights or they don't want to, or even getting like injured with that, just stressed out overall, managing a lot. It's just a conglomerate of different things you may see piecing together over time.
I think avoidance could also be a factor. Avoidance might not be entirely obvious, like not showing up to practice. Like that would probably be obvious, but avoidance could be like, maybe being kind of late or sort of dialing it in a little, just like not really feeling fully present, or even just being a little more distracted, or the disinterest piece for sure.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. The disinterest piece is definitely, disinterest is very, available to see too, to the naked eye, right? Like if there's an athlete that loves that, is so gung-ho about coming to practice and so gung-ho about competing in their sport, and then all of a sudden they start drawing back from it, that's a very, very telling sign of burnout, and a very telling sign of, if it's not burnout, it's something, and that something needs to be addressed, and to check in on that athlete. And so there's, Sophia, you talked about kind of the teetering off in strength, and I think that's why from a data science standpoint, with all my athletes, I do KPI dashboards, and we measure that kind of stuff. And I'm, even if it's not, 1 rep max testing, I'm taking grip strength, I'm taking, jump data, just things like that, because those are easy signs to test the central nervous system and muscle fatigue. And I think that data is, people always make a fuss about, keeping data, but a lot of people don't use it for the right way. They just take it and don't really actually apply it. But those are really simple ways to measure physically burnout. And I think that, I'm wondering if you've done that with any athletes that you have, or if you've done that yourself as an athlete.
Definitely. I would say there's a time and a place to focus on things like numbers as indicators of performance. So, for example, like as a rookie lifter, it's very easy to make gains. No matter what you do, you're pretty much going to see progress, like moving upward. For me, as a very experienced lifter, like if I go up maybe like 5, 10, heck, 15 pounds in one lift in a year is like freaking huge. I would consider progress even not going down. So like sometimes it's even like, watching that, but we watch things like estimated 1 rep max. Granted, also looking at other movements. So I do powerlifting where I have 3 movements, squat, bench, and deadlift I'm trying to get good at. So those I may not see, like I'll see maybe 2.5, 5 kilos added on in a whole year. But I have accessory work I can challenge myself with, or maybe variations of the lift. Maybe I can get like an SSB squat PR, and that makes me feel like I have a little accomplishment along the way. So it helps build small wins, which is, I think, a key factor in burnout, keeping it engaging. You're still able to set goals for something. Like I set dumb goals for things like my accessory work, like lunges. All right, last week I was doing 100 pounds. This week I want to do 105. And then you can at least challenge yourself from the week before, but keeping that competition amongst you and yourself, and recognizing you want to make change, especially you're going through rehab. You can't compete against the person you were pre-rehab. You have to set a new boundary for yourself and then just try to be better than the week before, to just keep yourself engaged and be like, okay, let me get a little bit better than that. But recognize there may be a huge dip from where you were, but that doesn't mean you regressed as much as like that graph may show.
Right, for sure. No, totally, I totally agree. Yeah, if I just focused on my snatch and clean and jerk numbers all the time, I'd be a pretty miserable person. So it's important to look at, the variations, and and the overall feeling of, certain things that are improving outside of those the main lifts.
Definitely. And you can set a bunch of goals too. I think that's one of the funnest parts about being like a diverse athlete is, I have the powerlifting goals, but sometimes I'll do strongman stuff. I challenge myself with that. Or, if you have like cardiovascular goals, if you want to bike for a certain amount or run, you can keep a ton of different goals for yourself. Or even like I have one of my clients who got into rock climbing. So his goals are he wants to get to the level 6s. I now know a little bit about what level 6s mean in rock climbing. I had to learn actually how to monitor his dosage of activity to help with just overall dose management, because now is a new dosage, a new drop into his bucket. But it allowed him to have fun with activity. And he needed that. And I think that's what it is too, recognizing when someone just needs something different and how can we incorporate it in so that they don't get hurt and they can explore this new activity and have fun with it.
Definitely. Sarah, I'm curious to hear from you if you've worked with some clients that have dealt with burnout, from a mental health specialist and counseling lens, how you've helped them through their burnout.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, usually when I'm looking at approaching an athlete or any client really in the counseling process, I'm kind of looking at sort of how their symptoms might be showing up in multiple areas of life. So how might burnout, or let's say even symptoms of anxiety, be presenting in their sport, but also how might those symptoms be presenting in their personal lives or in their jobs or schoolwork or whatever. So some of the things that we've kind of already touched on so far, like if it's helpful to kind of take a break or scale back. I love all the things that Sophia was just describing about like creating the training program specifically to kind of help keep that curiosity and excitement going, even if you're still doing the same movements every week or the same skill every week. Finding ways to still maintain and build confidence. I think that that's really a key aspect of it, especially when you have a strong athlete who has a tie within their identity to performing, or it's a very big piece of their daily routine that they want to keep going, but they might need, to kind of ease back a little bit. I'm personally kind of in that boat right now, right? I'm recovering from a major surgery and I want to lift all the heavy things, but I can't. And like Sophia has to tell me what she just said, like every week, like don't compare yourself to who you were 6 months ago or even 3 months ago. Like those weights.
That was her reminder in video for you, Sarah.
I know, right? I can just go back and be like, talking to me. Yeah, no, but truly, it truly is. But even still, like, okay, kind of a little bit of a tangent here, but like, so I'll have videos of some of my lifts, right? These are things that my other trainer would also program for me too. And even being able to look back 1 year apart, I might be lifting the same weight, but the sets and the reps might be different. And it might look a little cleaner, So it's like, oh yeah, a year ago I was deadlifting that same number, but I was doing 3x3. And this year I'm doing a 5x5, and look how smooth that was, So it's like these little pieces of being able to kind of like sustain a sense of confidence, even if that means you're taking some degree of pause and making adjustments and adaptations within how you like either are training or managing your stress levels or managing your symptoms, if it's anxiety or depression or something else, how how you're handling all of that in the many areas of your life. So kind of a broad way of answering the question.
No, for sure. I love everything you said, and I definitely agree with that. Something that stuck out to me is a video thing and comparing from a year ago. It's so true. I have people that swipe up on my Instagram stories and are like, "Why do you record your 60% of your water at max lifts of your snatch? Like, you're making that lift. You don't need to watch it over again." But the way I was snatching, 75 kilos last year and the way I'm snatching 80 kilos now is way different and from a year ago. Right. And so seeing that progress and how I'm moving, not just the weight, is so, so important. So that can build confidence in itself, not just looking at, numbers, like Sophia said, not just looking at numbers and looking at, different things too. I'm
Yeah, and
interested.
sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say one last thing. I think that we can sometimes, we meaning we, as if we all identify as somebody who is athletic or a fitness enthusiast, can underestimate our own skills. So it's like if there's sort of this intensity or urgency that we kind of have to always be performing at our peak. And that if we have a setback or if we take a break for something, that we're going to lose our skill or we're going to lose our strength somehow. And, you can even test that out, to see if that's even true, sort of if the prediction is actually the reality. Take a little bit of a break, come back to it and see if it actually went away, or if you just were worried that it was going to go away. But that it might actually still be there, or maybe it just takes a little bit of a transition to get back, but it will come back.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think in individual athletes, it might, there's different tactics, but what about, creating a culture of a team that is keeping an eye on burnout? I'm interested, Sophia, if you've worked with any teams or any team sport athletes that are coaches, it's not easy, but it's easier, less challenging to identify burnout when you're one-on-one with a client or an athlete. But when you have a team of people, how do you measure burnout in that sense? And how do you keep an eye on that kind of thing?
Ooh, good question. So I think twofold here. I think measuring it is difficult, but I have kind of what things that I monitor as a coach. But I think that team environments can mitigate the risk for burnout, even in individual sports, because I don't know if you've ever gotten the chance to train in a truly electrifying environment where you guys are egging each other on, West Side style, everyone's setting PRs,
Yeah.
I got the chance to be on the Northeastern powerlifting team. 50 college kids cheering each other on to lift as much weight as possible. You already know that was kind of stupid, but we would I set some of the craziest PRs ever in that weight room because of that, environment. So I think that it can also come with a lot of pressure to try to compete with that team. That being said, it's probably one of the most supportive environments for lifting I've ever experienced. And I have my team now, and I have a bunch of people that I train with to get that camaraderie. In terms of a team environment, you still need to have some form of a weekly check-in or a checkpoint where people can at least make or express themselves. I have a bunch of checkpoints where for the most part, I know how people are doing most days of the week, or if not every few days. If I haven't heard from somebody in a few days where they're seeing a post, seeing a video, and I'm like, okay, where is this person? I can kind of catch on. It's like Sarah said, it's not just lifting, it's every aspect. Someone who's normally super on top of it, and then they just, hey, that's weird. They didn't do their check-in sheet, that's not like them. Maybe something's up, or whatever. You can kind of catch on to these things, but you have to have some checkpoint along the way when you're managing. I told you Northeastern 50 kids. You have to have strategies. We had racks and we had rack captains, and the rack captain was involved, in charge of managing the situation on each rack, and then they would bring it to the head coach and be like, hey, this is how my rack is doing. If anyone was having an issue, that would get brought up to the coach, and the coach would then pull that athlete aside and be like, hey, what's going on? So I definitely think you can create that in team environments too.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that I implemented with, one of my college baseball teams I worked with, that I actually learned from my weightlifting coach was wellness questionnaires. I mean, especially, when you're working, as a performance coach one-on-one with somebody and you have individual clients, it can be easier to check in. But when you have a team of, 30, 35 people, you need a way to mass produce, wellness, check-ins. And so Google Form or some sort of, app to use for wellness questionnaire is a really, really good, useful way to have people, even anonymously, if you want it to be, to check in with them.
That's really cool. I like that. And I think just even encouraging some autonomy, especially if it is a team, because a lot of the time the team will sort of develop its own identity, and encouraging, getting to know your teammates or, your athletes, on kind of understanding what their personal circumstances are and kind of encouraging that there's still some level of that identity and autonomy there.
Definitely. There's so many fun ways that you can do this kind of stuff on particularly like collegiate level teams. I think it's almost funner because you have that environment where it's almost like if you guys did the Greek life sororities, you had like a little sister, in powerlifting, like you can have like a little person, like a new person on the team that you're responsible for, like going to lunch with them.
It's almost like a buddy system or a big brother system.
That's
exactly cool. These are just ideas. There's so many strategies for team environments. It's almost more fun. I think actually one of the harder things is training completely by yourself. Like if you have no one around 100%. You and you're like trudging through workouts, like especially COVID time, you saw it. People like dropped off training because like they didn't have anyone. So like
it was brutal. I mean, I was in my garage. It was unbelievable. And that's actually something that I realized, for a long time, I was on a weightlifting team that was virtual, and I had weekly check-ins online with my coach, and I finally, just said I got to join a team locally that, and then obviously I met my coach, and the rest is history. But like I needed to be around other weightlifters. One, because I like being better. Brings out more of myself, and I think it's the whole saying, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. And that's kind of what I did with my competitive weightlifting career. Was like if I'm by myself, I'm the best one, or if I'm with other people that I invite, I might be the best one. If I go out and go to a club where there's elite level weightlifters, it's only going to make me better. And then just having people around with the same camaraderie. I mean, like we do a thing called like Singlet Saturday where we're we max out on Saturdays, and like for me, like that's huge. Like just having that camaraderie, like and having that cohesiveness as a team and that the support system is so huge.
Definitely, that's awesome. Singlet Saturday, I love it. But yeah, teamwork makes the dream work. You can definitely have a lot more fun with the people around you. And that can be one of the biggest allies that we have really in that long-term prevention of burnout, is surrounding yourself ideally with, an awesome coach like you found, and, a good team, a good community, a good gym, try to put yourself with people smarter than you, challenge yourself to get to that next level. If that's what you're looking for in the sport, and that's what makes you happy, that's something that can help along the way to really help keep people in these sports for the long term.
Yeah.
Sure. So,
and I think if if an athlete needs a break, I think sort of like reinforcing that as a positive decision rather than discouraging them.
Totally. Yeah, that's such a good point, Sarah. It like has often been thought of like you're bailing out on your team or you're bailing out on the sport and you don't care enough, but sometimes stepping away for whatever amount of time actually means you care about the sport more and you want that longevity.
For sure.
So definitely. Last minute here, I want to kind of ask both of you, whoever can go first, your best tip for preventing burnout, and your last few words and what you want to leave our viewers with.
Definitely. I would say long-term for it is like, we're all in it to have fun, and you can't take it too seriously. Even with the highest performance level goals, you have to remember the love you have for the sport and the fun that you have with it, and let yourself freely express that fun. And if you find that you're not having fun with it, it's okay to walk away from it for a sec, find something that does give you that feeling of joy and fun with activity again. And then if you feel like it's appropriate to turn back, then do. If not, maybe you found a new sport along the way, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say checking in with yourself, or if you have a buddy or a person that you trust that you can talk to kind of just like have a little moment to check in with yourself periodically, just to kind of monitor how things are going. Like, are you starting to feel overwhelmed? Are you starting to feel disinterested? Do you need a break? Are you a little overexerted and exhausted? Just so that you can kind of see it early, maybe catch it and try to intervene sooner rather than later.
For sure. Well, great advice from both of you today, and shared so much wisdom. And I really appreciate both of you coming on and spending, an hour talking about a really important topic that I think we will definitely be meeting again for another episode on burnout in the future for sure.
Definitely. Can I hope it's okay if I recommend this, but I want to plug Sophia's Instagram post on this, because it was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 slides that had some really thorough details and descriptions and tips for people. So I don't know if you're cool with sharing that, but I think that could also be a really helpful resource if anyone wants to maybe read about it some more.
Definitely. Funny enough, that was actually one of my best posts. So I pinned it to the top of my Instagram. So it is there if you guys follow me, soph.squats. So it's pinned right to the top, how to prevent burnout in powerlifting. But, the same principles apply to all athletes and individuals just doing activities.
Terrific. No, I'm glad you plugged that in, and that's an elite Instagram handle name. So that's impressive in its own right. So just a reminder for everybody listening, this live stream or recording actually is one of many. You can see the entire schedule of future streams at iocdf.org/peace of mind. You can also view recordings like this one of past live streams on IOCDF's YouTube channel, youtube.com/IOCDF. Remember to like and subscribe to get notified when live streams are scheduled. If you need any more resources, please visit iocdf.org. As always, thank you so much. And we're looking forward to the next time.